All right, y'all, we're going to pick back up where we left off to finish out this film. And my next endeavor is going to be looking into all of the different slave traders, the African slave traders, Mansa Musa being one of them. Interesting. I guess John Cabes was out of Ghana because I guess there's been some chatter and, a lot in regards to reparations, which is crazy. But anywho, I'm going to look into these other folks as well. Of course, validating sources and whatnot. And then this document also, which is pretty interesting. This was published in 1992. It's a very large document. A lot to read through, Lord of mercy. I'm trying to get to the title page, y'all. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Yeah, this one right here. So we'll see. Anyway, all right, let's get back into this.
Sale can be done in 3 different manners: through a broker, by auction, or by lots. Before concluding the deal, the black who is put up for sale is always made to climb on top of a table or a barrel so that he may be examined by a surgeon who will estimate his strength and his health. Once purchased, he is branded on the chest or the shoulder with a red-hot silver stamp in the master's initials.
A slave was often resold for 3 to 4 times his price on the African coast. A first-grade slave, called an India piece, young, sturdy, and in good health, could be worth as much as the yearly pay of a captain. The directors and tax collectors of the king's estate collected 1% on the sales price as a customs duty on the entry of the blacks in the colonies. And these sums, paid by
See all the epithets right there. Interesting.
The ship's captains, were deposited in the royal treasury. Scholars had to add the figures entered in the ship's inventories in order to count how many slaves were introduced in the colonies. For the 18th century alone, ships from Nantes deported around 400,000 Africans, of whom more than 50,000 died during the journey. Scholars estimate that the total number of people taken away from Africa by the Atlantic slave trade over 3 centuries was 12 to 15 million.
The ordinary productions of the islands cleared by the blacks are sugarcane, coffee, cotton, cocoa, indigo, cochineal, raku, ginger, and so on. The cultivation of sugar entails very important expenses for the planter, and this is what...
So I just want to insert here another just disclaimer, I guess. Fair use, fair use, fair use. And also, out of those millions, remember that a very small percentage, about 4%, were taken to North America. So, of course, much of this is going to cover the West Indies, those taken to the Caribbean and South America, and the things that drove trade in those areas, that being sugarcane. Okay.
It is carried out only on a large scale. However, it is the island's main production, and all of the others taken together employ less workers than this one.
In these colonies, now repopulated with black slaves, the white masters exerted an absolute power, reinforced by the intentional mixing of different African ethnic groups. Torn away from their native land, robbed of their identity, the slaves were given fancy or comical names. After being converted and baptized by the plantation priests complacently provided by the missions, they began a new life, with nothing beyond forced labor and corporal punishments. Despite bans and repression, however, the society of slaves took shape in a secret nocturnal life, punctuated by the rhythms of music and dance. The drum, venerated like a god, summoned the spirits of Africa in the cult of the voodoo, these ancestor or guardian spirits from the Gulf of Benin. Compulsory Christian religious practice was thus diverted and invested with the old African beliefs. Voodoo in Haiti, Candomblé in Brazil, Santeria in Cuba, and Shango cult in Trinidad brought together the congregations of the faithful who renewed with the African traditions. The rites of these new religions rebuilt the community links, nourished a spirit of solidarity, of resistance and revolt, and gave birth to a common language and culture, Creole. Kept in a state of barbaric submission, the growing mass of the slaves was a threat for the white colonists. To impose its tyrannical rule, the slave-owning order had at its disposal in the French colonies the Code Noir, promulgated under Prime Minister Colbert in 1685, which defined in unequivocal terms the juridical and social status of the slaves.
Article 2. Slaves, which are in our islands, are to be baptized and instructed in the Catholic religion. Article 12. The children who will be born of marriages between slaves will be slaves and will belong to the master of the women slaves. Article 22. We declare that everything that the slaves own belongs to their masters. Article 33. The slave who strikes his master, his mistress, or their children, either causing bruises or drawing blood, will be punished by death. Article 34. As for slaves assaulting free persons, we want them to be severely punished, even unto death if necessary. Article 38. The slave who has been a runaway for a month, counting from the day when his master reported his escape to the judge, will have his ears cut off and will be branded with a fleur-de-lis on one shoulder. And, if he does it again, counting the same length of time from the day of denunciation, he will have his leg cut off below the knee, and he will be branded with a fleur-de-lis on the other shoulder. The third time, he will be punished with death. Article 42. Only masters, when they believe that their slaves have deserved it, can have them chained or beaten with rods. We forbid masters to torture them or to mutilate them in any way.
What? That
Runaway
is
slaves
torture.
became rebels, maroons, and a threat for the colonial
Lord.
institution. Steadily growing in numbers, taking refuge in swamps, forests, or mountains, united by the rites of voodoo and organized in camps, the maroons terrified the plantations. Blamed for sorcery and poisonings, they were hunted down without mercy by the authorities or by the planters' militias. The slaves once bought became the property of their masters, and the Code Noir ranked them in the category of movable property.
Article 44. We declare
You see
slaves...
how he just threw that in there with the maroons? Because a lot of those maroon colonies were in North America. And some of this stuff I feel like they really mix up and just kind of throw it all in one pot. Just breeding so much confusion. Listen, some of y'all might get upset because I'm stopping this, okay, and talking during the movie, so to speak. This is not for like your entertainment, okay? This is something we're exploring together. And yes, I will impart my commentary and my thoughts, as stupid as you may feel they may be, into this because it's my channel and that's what I'm finna do, okay? That's interesting what they just stated. But yeah, more research.
to be movable property, and as such, they become part of the joint estate of husband and wife. Article 46. When impounding slaves, officers of the law will follow the formalities prescribed by our ordinances and customs relative to the impounding of movable property.
A sugar plantation is divided in three main parts: lands, buildings, and chattel. The yearly yield of a plantation being about 200 barrels of sugar, one must farm at least 3,000 acres of sugar cane, and the total surface of the estate must be 12,000 acres. In a plantation of that size, one must plant have a chattel of at least 250 blacks, 80 oxen, and 60 mules.
The relative location of the estate's buildings reflected the hierarchy of the closed world of the plantation. After the great house, i.e. the master's house, came the infirmary and the kitchens, the huts of house servants, the village...
Okay. So this is just me double checking my own ignorance, right? And this is still just on first glance. I got to do more research. But so maroon colonies were independent settlements of self-liberated slaves who escaped plantation bondage, creating autonomous, often hidden communities in remote areas of North America and the West Indies. Key sites included places in Jamaica, the Great Dismal Swamp between Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida bayous. And they survived by farming and with guerrilla tactics. Louisiana also, Georgia Low Country, but also to Suriname, Guyana, I believe, and Jamaica as well. Okay, so maroon isn't necessarily a term for particular people. It's various people who were enslaved. Okay, got it. Still distinctions, still differences in that. All right.
of artisan slaves, and then the church with its steeple and its bells which punctuated the working day, the dovecot, the smithy, the wheelwright shop, the sheds and the warehouses. a watermill and a draft mill, a sugar mill with 2 sets of boilers, 2 purgeries or curing houses, a boiler, and the gildevery where rum was made up the operating buildings of the plantation. At the other end of the estate, the house of the commandeur, or overseer, guards the village of the field slaves, the most numerous and the most harshly treated. And finally, at a distance from the other buildings, a few huts are set apart for the sick and for the new slaves, who are called bossal.
The tasks of the slaves vary according to the seasons and the type of cultivation which they have to perform, but it may be said in general that they are very fatiguing. The slaves who are in the garden, that is those who work on the plantation, are woken before dawn by the crack of the commandeur's whip, whose job it is to watch over them and to punish them if they are lazy. And the work lasts until night for those who are not required to work at the mill. Apart from working on the garden, the slaves, twice a day, are required to collect grass for the livestock used to power in the mills. While about 1/4 of the slaves die during the ocean crossing, about the same number die during their first 2 years. Few constitutions are sturdy enough to survive a labor of 14 to 15 hours per day. And the average length of the life of a slave is 7 to 9 years. The labor of those who are employed at the mills or the boilers is extremely arduous, and it calls for very diligent workers. The blacks feed bundles of sugarcane into rollers set in motion by water, wind, or animals. These rollers crush the cane and extract the vazu, or saccharine substance. The juices are collected in a boiler and thickened. They are then poured into other boilers, under which a hotter fire is stoked. These operations aim to separate the foam from the sugar and to condense the sugar into crystals, which make up unrefined sugar. This sugar is sent to Europe, where it is refined. Before this, however, in the French islands, sugar undergoes one last preparation called terrage, or claying, to separate it into its heterogeneous parts. In this form, it takes fewer ships to transport it to Europe. The sugar is poured into conical molds to drain the molasses, which is used to make various types of rum.
The sugar loaves, whitened by the claying process, were later dried in an oven, crushed, and put inside barrels. The barrels of white and brown sugar were then loaded onto the departing ships.
There were in 1757 in the French part of Santo Domingo about 30,000 persons and 100,000 black or mulatto slaves who laboured in the sugar, indigo or cocoa plantations and who shortened their lives so that we may indulge in our new tastes and satisfy needs which have been unknown to our forefathers.
His voice.
As soon as they have completed their sale and received in produce a value equivalent to their slaves, the captains who have carried them to America hasten to return to Europe.
Their hold and steerage packed with tropical goods, the slave ships took on again the appearance of peaceful trading vessels. After a final ocean crossing lasting 8 weeks, captains and crew eventually returned to their port of registry, but not all of those who had left reached the end of the journey. In the 18th century, 1,000 sailors from Nantes drowned in shipwrecks, and 9,000 others who either died of illness or deserted never came back. A silted-up channel prevented heavy and medium-sized ships from sailing up all the way into the estuary of the Loire River until Nantes. The
Okay, sorry, y'all. Just needed to make sure that this was still recording.
cargoes were thus unloaded downstream in Pambeuf, and a dense traffic of flat-bottomed boats transported the island's produce into the ship owners' warehouses on Quai de la Fosse or on Ile Feydeau. The captain first reported at the Admiralty. His report was recorded in the log of entries of ocean-going ships. The captain's declaration also comprised an account of the journey and a general inventory of the goods carried. The captain then submitted to the ship owner a financial management report, which enabled the latter to draw up the statement of laying up and return, to calculate the profit and loss, and to distribute the returns.
See, the devil is really in the details, and that's when I have to look up some of these captain registries and stuff, like all the records that you can find, even regarding just the good, like just minuscule, menial stuff, can really shed light on a lot. It's just a matter of compiling and accessing and finding, those resources.
The rate of profit gives an idea of the appeal of slaving expeditions. While the average rate was between 4 and 6% in the 18th century, the most lucrative expeditions made 70% over 7 years, and the most successful made 100 to 150%. In spite of the risks and of declining profits, the slave trade drew capital, but the shareholders had the wisdom to spread their money over several different expeditions. Thus, fortunes were built and dynasties of ship owners were founded. Centered on the slave trade, the island's trade continued to expand and to sustain the activity of the harbour and of the economy. 22 sugar refineries and 17 factories gave employment to thousands of workers. The city thrived. In its streets, Spaniards, Dutchmen and black servants mingled with a population which had grown in the span of 1 century from 40,000 to 80,000 inhabitants. With 15% of the French fleet, Nantes had become the first harbour in the kingdom for ship-owning and shipbuilding. Its dominance asserted itself as trade with Africa and the Americas expanded. Between 1707 and 1847, almost one half of the 3,400 French slaving expeditions left from Nantes. The remaining 55% of the slave trade was shared between Bordeaux, Le Havre, La Rochelle, Saint-Malo, Lorient, Honfleur, and a dozen other harbours. The economic success of ship owners and traders expressed itself in a quest for prestige and renown. These gentlemen of business guarded their opulence behind facades which flaunted their wealth and respectability. A good part of the profits from the slave trade was invested in building mansions. Mayor Mellier gave the impetus at the beginning of the 18th century by bringing together a group of shareholders with a view to lay out and to divide into plots the Île Feydeau. Seneret, architect and city official, drew up a general plan for the convenience and the embellishment of Nantes. His work was completed by his successor, Crucy. The architecture of these 2 to 3 story buildings reflected the needs and the activities of their owners and tenants. On the ground floor were the stores and warehouses, on the second floor the ceremonial apartments, and on the third floor the rented apartments.
You know, I hope if they're not going to do that in here, I can find a resource that just as they're showcasing all of the wealth amassed and what was built from, for the Europeans, they need to also do that for the traders and those who benefited in Africa.
Shareholders' associations created by Gralin, Delorme, Méliné and Duparc put together vast building programs which created and fashioned the new quarters. Speculation and a shortage of rental property ensured the success of these great urbanization works which revolutionized the shape and the appearance of Nantes. Wood panellings and wooden floors adorned with discreet luxury the interiors of these apartments. Walnut and cherry rivaled with mahogany and other exotic woods in the locally made furniture, which bore witness to the influence of the Anglo-Dutch style. The life of business and its annoyances, the brilliance of the salons, where the latest fashions were tinged with the exotic of the islands, the sumptuous receptions in the mansions of the wealthiest ship owners, these aspects of life in the city bore the stamp of the colonial economy which fed it. Around the coffee, sweetened with sugar and served in silver and earthenwares, one talked about profits, conversed about the arts, debated about the ideas of the philosophers, and castigated the friends of the blacks and their egalitarian humanism. First blow was dealt to the slave system in 1791. During the night of the 14th of August, on the hills above the town of Le Cap Français in Saint-Domingue, the slave bookman gave the signal for the start of the slaves' revolt at the voodoo ceremony of Bois Caïmont. Plantations were devastated, and more than 1,000 whites were massacred. While the young mulatto, Vincent Auger, paid with his life for the colonists' opposition to the principles of equality enacted by the French Revolution, it was a freedman, Toussaint Louverture, who at the head of the black revolutionists imposed the abolition of slavery in Saint-Domingue in 1793. The determination of the Society of the Friends of the Blacks, led by Brissot, Mirabeau, Condorcet, and the Abbé Grégoire, drove the convention to vote the decree of the 4th of February, 1790.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. They revolted and rose up. I know. And it really just engenders, is that the right usage of that word? Y'all, it's 3 a.m, okay, so forgive me, but it really does just engender in me more reverence and just respect for our people and our revolts in the 1500s, well before the Haitian Revolution. Not to take away from that, but yeah, man, we've been fighting back. A lot of us of different ethnic groups who were victims of these systems and institutions. So kudos to all of us. I'm going to stop it right here. I know there's a little bit more to finish. Not much at all, actually. Yeah, so thank y'all again for tuning in. This is the end of this particular film. When we review more films in the future, yes, I will be talking through them and over them and stopping them at random times. It just is what it is. I don't know if there's a way that I can link or share this if you don't have, like a student ID or access to the platform. I'll try to see if I can find it somewhere else, and that way on your own leisure and at your own time and discretion, you can go check it out on your own. But anyway, please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share. Be blessed.